And we are live, everybody. Welcome to this week's Café Hangout.
It's John Pollock and Wai Ting, and unlike most weeks, we have a third man here in the studio with us, a guy that I could tell from his nod gave the opening Café Hangout theme a seal of approval. A pleasure to welcome Evan Husney into the program to join us to chat. Dark Side of the Ring, Evan, thank you so much. Joining us in studio, no less. You already win huge points with the postmarks out there.
Thanks so much, man. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Awesome.
There's lots to chat with you about. Of course, lots coming up on the show today. We're also going to be opening up the phone lines. We want to hear from many of you if you want to chime in about your thoughts about Dark Side of the Ring, and we'll be getting to all the other news items later on in the show. The number to call, 732-800-4423. You can also Skype in by searching for Post Wrestling. But Evan, you are here in Toronto, not originally from Toronto, but this has kind of become your makeshift home where a lot of Dark Side of the Ring is being created that some people might not be familiar with.
Yeah, that's true. Vice Canada is the production company for Dark Side of the Ring. They picked up the tab when we first started. So I've relocated here on and off for the better part of 3 years, producing the show from the beginning.
So we're coming off of the announcement of season 2. The trailer just dropped, and it's going to be coming back on Tuesday night, March 24th. You're coming back with a 2-hour season premiere based around Chris Benoit. Mm-hmm. But tell us, just a few days removed from the announcement, obviously, like so much of your life goes into this second season. But what's the response been like? Is your head just spinning several days removed from the announcement?
Well, yeah, I mean, because the response has been awesome. It's so cool to see, just how stoked people are and how many people have seen the show even since season 1 aired, and how many new fans we have. But yeah, obviously it's a little it's been a little crazy because we're still making the show. We're still actively finishing like the better part, like the back half of the show. So it's the first time we've had to kind of deliver shows to air as we're airing. So the pressure is on.
What were the different kind of pressures going into season 1, where this is an unfamiliar entity, and there's that question: is the show going to hit? Is it different this time because you guys have put forward a very successful first season? It's
kind of like a band doing their second record, I guess. We had a good first record, but we didn't know we were still kind of making it and didn't know what it would ultimately become. And also, I think, in some ways, not to their fault, but Viceland, wrestling isn't a huge part of their DNA. So they didn't really know what the response was going to be. And so their investment level was only so much. And then, we kind of proved ourselves in a big way. And so then now it's there's a whole set of, more people looking at the show and wanting to, help out with the show and stuff. So there's just all these new kind of pressures. But but in a lot of ways, on the flip side of that, working with wrestlers and other people for these stories. Now, a lot of these people have seen the show, which we didn't have that before. So before it was we're doing this show and it's about wrestling, but they didn't really fully understand. And now a lot of people know it by name in terms of the people in that community. So it helped us with access, I think, a lot this year, more so than before.
From what I was able to gather, it seemed to create the overshoot expectations when it was airing on Vice. Can you maybe take us back to after that first week, what your reaction was like and what the reaction was like at Vice? To see this thing kind of come out of nowhere and be what it was. Is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it the most viewed thing on Viceland?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. That was pretty wild because we were kind of we weren't really sure when the show would when season 1 would air, because we had finished it, we had delivered it, it was off into the world, and they were kind of playing around with different dates of when it was going to come out. And we didn't really actually find out it was going to go on the air until 2 weeks before it did.
Oh, boy.
And we didn't have any marketing materials ready. So it was a mad dash to do that as well. But I think it was a huge surprise for everyone. I mean, I knew that as long as we could get the word out to the wrestling community, they would show up for it. Mm-hmm. Because you just don't see television documentaries about wrestling all that often. And so when it did hit and it kept growing, everybody was super surprised, It
seems like the natural progression as well, that for wrestling fans, they crave information and these stories, but a lot of the time it's they would take it in any medium they could, just throw on a camcorder and listen to a guy talk for 3 hours. There are people that would live for those DVDs, and now it's the level of expectation from a production standpoint is that much higher, and I think that's now kind of the new expectation level is seeing something that is very, very slick in its production. That was certainly something that you you guys were able to present to the audience.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, those shoot interviews you're talking about, all those like Ramada Inn, shoot interviews, those were what we saw and we loved as fans. And we're like, wouldn't it be so cool if you like took the shoot interview concept and you blew it out to be like the most important thing ever, like, and that's really where it started. It was like, what if we gave like this, like shiny, sleek true crime vibe to a shoot interview, like high production value. And that's kind of just how it started.
So when you like, were you a wrestling fan when you started? Like, you were the one who pitched it to Vice, and
yeah, Jason and I, and just for those who don't know, Jason Eisner does the show with me. He directs the episodes, and I produce. We kind of both do a lot of stuff. We've known each other forever, almost like separated at birth. We both are huge wrestling fans growing up. So for me, it was like 5 years old, early like 1990, 91 WWF era, for me. And then of course it always ebbs and flows. And then like I got into other things as a kid, and then Attitude Era came around, and that was, I wore a different wrestling shirt to school every day, and bought bootleg ECW VHS tapes from my local mall and stuff. There was an RF video stand at our local mall, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it was really weird. Yeah. And then just like always been a part of my life, like in and out, and then like I think right around the time we pitched the show, like I just got back into it.
It sounds weird because of given your current position right now, but how just as a consumer are you right now to what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, not so much like in the last couple of months, just because we've been like so crazy trying to finish everything, but like definitely have been following pay-per-views. I've had the opportunity to go to a few of like the marquee AEW pay-per-views, not the last one, but some of the ones before that, like all the launching ones. And just, it's been amazing just to see like how since last year almost it felt like it just really took off. Wrestling just exploded in a big way on TV and everywhere.
So these stories that you used for season 1 were all stories that you had, I would assume, known about through your fandom.
Yeah.
And how did you go about choosing those specific ones for that series?
Yeah. Basically, it all started, just to go back a little bit, it all started with just wanting to do a documentary about Bruiser Brody. That was like the first thing. Like we wanted to, Jason and I really wanted to do like a wrestling documentary with Vice. That was like my goal. And I just saw it. Maybe we could do like a feature length Bruiser Brody thing, because we had just gotten into him. We didn't know him as kids really, but we just got into him because he's like the coolest thing ever. And the story is so unbelievable. And so we just pitched that as a feature doc. And then of course we get the question of, can this be a series? What other story is going to be? And then it was like, okay, well, what if we, and then we started looking at other stories. And then originally we were supposed to do 10 for season 1, and it actually got shortened. There's actually a couple episodes for this season 2, that are holdovers from that we had like partially done.
So they were partially shot.
They were partially shot going into season 2, yeah. And so anyway, going back to picking the stories, it was just kind of like what could hold an hour. What stories kind of check the boxes of like that kind of blurred lines between like, reality and fiction, and kind of look at that. That's the most interesting to me, is kind of like wrestling stories that really are unique to that world. They couldn't be in any other sport, any other form of entertainment, is like that kind of blurred lines aspect, the kayfabe kind of thing, So we kind of try to look at stories that really exemplify that. Some that like new audience, people who aren't wrestling fans could get into, like the Montreal Screwjob or Macho Man or whatever, and then like deep cut ones like Gino Hernandez or whatever that like wrestling fans want to know more about, So it's kind of trying to do a mixture of both.
And that had to be encouraging for you guys, because you come out of the gate with Macho Man, with Montreal, that you think are going to have the widest appeal, but you just saw the audience continue to escalate for the Von Erichs. And then it to me, those were the episodes where it's like, you guys have hit onto something, and there is a fan base out there that it doesn't just have to be nostalgia WWF stories. It can be wide ranging. And the Von Erich one, I think, was among people's most favorite of that first season, which again, to an outsider, a story that it's impossible to process without watching it. And like, this is an actual series of events.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And that was kind of the thing. It was like, can we have a mixture of stories that can help, we always tried to engineer the show for people who don't know anything about any of this. That's what we tried. We tried to not make it seem too insider. We tried to make it have broad appeal, like no matter what. And we felt like some of the popular episodes like helped people understand aspects of like what makes wrestling unique, and the backstage politics, especially with like Screwjob. And then we could go places with Gino and Von Erichs, and then people would be with us and they would be like, okay, yeah, now I'm into it,
without sort of that, track record, now, I mean, season 2, you have season 1 to show people. But
Yeah.
when you're shooting season 1, how do you earn people's trust to get some of the incredible intimate interviews that you did end up getting?
And with all due respect, with the title "Dark Side of the Ring,"
Well, it didn't have that title before.
Yeah. What was the original title?
We just had like a temporary operating title just to put on paperwork, which was the Squared Circle or something, or Squared Circle was like our just working title. We never had the intention of using that title. And the funny thing about the title is we could not come up with a name. It was the hardest thing to come up with a name for the show until my mother came up with Dark Side of the Ring.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, Mom, what do we do? And she said Dark Side of the
knows
Ring.
best.
And Mom figures it out. Yeah, my mom came up with the title. My dad writes a lot of our voiceover, so it's like a family
Really?
affair. Yeah.
Wow,
That's
really cool.
that's very cool.
Are they
Yeah.
wrestling fans or no?
Well, they've had to grow up with me being wrestling fans. My dad actually got me to meet Stone Cold Steve Austin when I was a kid,
No kidding.
which
Wow.
was amazing. There's actually a video of it.
This is on YouTube. I actually
Yeah,
saw
you seen it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. I got to my very first shoot interview. I got to actually ask him. He didn't know there was a camera on him, but I got to ask him like what he thinks of Bill Goldberg, because this was 1998.
Yeah.
I was like, so what do you think of Bill Goldberg? And he's like, oh, I think he's doing a good job of copying me, but he's got to make a living too or something, like, but
the
could have
scoop.
sold that to Meltzer in 98 or something. Anyway.
But yeah, like trying to get those interviews for the first
Oh,
season.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, obviously it was tough. I mean, like we started, what actually bought us a lot of cred was the fact that we did a Bruiser Brody episode, which was the pilot. We didn't send it around necessarily to people, but we had a trailer that we showed people. And there was so much respect in the wrestling community, like among wrestlers, but for him, that it was like literally. I remember talking to Bret Hart on the phone and being like, we want to do the Montreal Screwjob. So he's like, I've said everything I've already wanted to say, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Bret.
whatever. But I said like,
Well,
in '97, no. And I said like, no. Well, we did this story about Bruiser Brody. We talked to his widow. We did this, and then he went into a story about what Brody meant to him, and he's like, "All right, I'll do it," And then so it became this like our calling card in a big way because people respected him so much. But it's still there's other instances with like family members. Gino Hernandez episode was really tough because the family, was in belief of living in fear for their lives at the time by speaking out because they thought that he was murdered by the mob. So it was like I had flown down there with no cameras and spent a day with them and trying to just we're a non-threatening entity, let's do this together. But yeah, so it's all across the board. It was just probably the hardest part of making the show is getting the access, really.
And was there a noticeable difference this time around when you're going to people, they've seen the proof of concept, they're familiar with the series, you actually have examples you can show them of this is kind of what we're working towards instead of an idea in your head to try and convey?
Yeah, I think there's a case by case basis still with some folks, but I think it was definitely across the board much easier. There was like a shorthand there that like we could point to, like you're saying. But like with some of the other family members or some of the things, like there's some like if we're talking about the Benoit episodes, like I don't know if I could have done that just on my own. Like we had Chavo Guerrero, helped us in such a immense way to get people involved for that project, and of course with Martha to talk about as well, was a process, but it was awesome, working with her.
On the Benoit one, which is what you're going to kick off the season with.
Sure.
Do you feel it helped you that we are now 13 years coming up removed from this? Because I remember at the time, even several years after, it just was a subject that people I would talk to in the industry, like they really didn't want to touch it. Like it was too raw, and it was whether they had personal connections to Benoit or just felt that it was this stain against the industry, that the industry gets blamed for this guy as well. And I think with the separation of time, it's you can go revisit that, and it's you look at that 2007 period and just imagine like in this day and age, in the era of TMZ and Twitter, how that case is handled today. It's probably much different. Yeah, that's kind of one of many reasons why we wanted to do it, was just because of of hindsight now and how we can look at it in today's world. But also I think what drew us to want to do that episode was not only was it something that the audience really wanted to see, that was the top by a large margin. When we asked people last year on social media, what do you want to see? That was clearly number one. But the thing for me was like noticing other interviews that,
Sandra Toffolani, who's Nancy's sister, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chris Jericho, those like seeing and hearing their interviews over the past few years in terms of just like trying to get it off their chest and wanting to talk about it, wanting to revisit it now that some time has gone by, in an effort to kind of bring more closure for their own stories. That's kind of what was appealing to me in a way to trying to cover the story, where it's like we know details, we know some of the bullet points, but now let's make it kind of about the people that are still here. And so that's more or less the way in which you'll see that it's kind of approached, is more about that.
Who else is featured in this episode?
Chavo Guerrero Jr., whom we had been talking for over a year before we shot anything for it. So he's a huge part of it. There's David Benoit, Chris's other son from another marriage. Sandra Toffolani, as I mentioned. Vicky Guerrero is in the episode. Chris Jericho is in the episode. Dean Malenko is in the episode.
Wow.
God, am I forgetting somebody?
And you got Dino, I would assume, after... I mean, he left WWE.
Yeah. And Dean, is just part of that circle. And then it just like as more subjects came aboard, it just really felt like, okay, now we have this inner circle of the people who kind of were touched by this. I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people from different perspectives. And so I think that's going to be the most interesting thing for people to see, is just that it really does feel like this is the inside circle telling their story.
Going back to just the beginning of the series, is it ever even broached about trying to secure footage from WWE, or is it a realization from the get-go that that's not going to be a door that's going to open?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we just, as Vice being a media company, we just approach it in that way. Like, we're doing journalistic studies from this, and it needs to be objective. And so that's kind of the way that it's approached.
I think it's probably best that way.
Yeah.
With the idea of like the reenactments. I mean, that's one where... it certainly it could go good, it could go bad. I didn't really know how it would turn out, but it seems like it was something that here was a way around footage that we can't have that was able to enhance a lot of
very
this.
Tastefully done.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the reenactments was just like, it actually came from, I think we were talking about it before we went on the air. It was like, there's a film called The Thin Blue Line, which is like this seminal 80s true crime documentary. It's kind of the benchmark of true crime documentaries. And the reenactments in that are so stylistic, noir, just like atmospheric, nightmarish. They're amazing. And that's what we wanted to try and emulate as much as possible. More so not because of the absence of footage, but just because the absence of telling stories where there wouldn't be any footage at all. Like just, locker room stuff, car rides and hotel rooms and things. And also just to kind of make it feel more cinematic, and that's what we wanted to do with these stories, because they are so cinematic. These wrestling stories are unlike anything, as everyone knows, in wrestling. So that was kind of the idea. It was just to kind of enhance it as much as possible. They're not the easiest things to make, but...
Well, I was going to ask you, like, I mean, it would seem incredibly fun to have, like, a bunch of people dress up as, like, your favorite wrestlers trying to shoot these things, but was it also stressful?
Yeah, it can be stressful because, we have a limited pool in terms of what we can achieve and who we can get, and these people are so iconic. Some of them are, like the Randys and the Road Warriors, or like other people, like they're so iconic, and like, you want to live up to that. You don't want to let people down and like, oh, that guy, but obviously there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and there's a lot of shadows, and you can get away with a lot. It'd be funny if people actually saw photos of what they look like, like before the
reveal at the end,
the dark side of the treatment, or dark side of the ring treatment, because people would probably be like, I don't know, man. Yeah, we've gotten away with a lot of cheats.
As you're diving into, in some cases, some very sensitive topics, have there ever been those late night phone calls from an interview subject of like, I don't know what I said on camera, you can't use that, or any of the, like things you have to navigate from people that they just, they'll be very open on camera, and then afterwards are, fearful in their head of how they'll be portrayed, for instance.
Of course. I mean, that's happened a lot, even in this show and other shows and things. It's, anytime you're dealing with a story, sometimes as raw as some of the ones that we are dealing with, especially this season, there's always going to be that. But like, for us, it's like we always have their best interest in mind. Like we're especially with the more sensitive stories, like it's, we're telling your story, and wrestlers and wrestling has had a very difficult history with media. We actually examined that with the Dr. D David Schultz episode, and so I think a lot of those there is that kind of stigma, like to where you wouldn't normally trust us in our position, but we're such huge marks that like, we want to put everybody over. We want to try to, like so.
Talk about some of the other subjects you have coming up in season 2.
Okay, yeah. So we started, like I mentioned, 2 episodes last season, which we so grateful we got to finish. Was the Dino Bravo story, which is about he was killed, and his family came home to find him, and it's a very sad story. And
it's never really been told like in serious detail,
Yeah.
like outside of unless you were reading like the Torch or the Observer, like
Yeah,
like
it's true.
I don't think many people are certainly not a deep dive into it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so that was one we'd got a chance to really get into last year. And so it kind of explores his involvement in that and that whole story, his post wrestling. I didn't
Very nice.
That was not an intentional pun.
Happens all the time.
But his post wrestling career. And one of the more odd duck episodes that we're doing this season is the Brawl for All, which we had started last year. Which was more like, we wanted to do something that was maybe more on the lighter side of the ring, and then try and do something with that. Even though there are dark aspects of that story, but it's more of a fun one.
Well, having a one-eyed guy in PCO can compete in the
goodness.
brawl. I mean, it's
That's mentioned
just
in
an
the
insane
Yeah.
idea that it was and brought to fruition. And I guess as you're speaking to it, like an example being a Jim Cornette, are you guys plotting out that this is a guy that, man, he can be our glue between so many different stories that as a historian, like that's where some of these subjects, it's like they go beyond just being needed for one episode.
Oh my gosh, Jim Cornette is a night off. We'll say, when you hear wrestlers talk about that, it's like it's like you could give him anything. You could literally like we just look at like what can Jim talk about, and it happens to be everything. But he's in about I think half the episodes this season. But he's just he just knows so much, and he's so entertaining, and he's been such a great asset in other ways, and with our footage and rare photos and things and other people, and so yeah. And we knew the brawl. It was like Brawl for All, and then getting Jim on it. Okay, that'll be good TV.
So the trailer also includes the episode that's going to be dedicated to Owen Hart, and you
Yes.
got to speak with Martha Hart.
Oh.
To me, was like that was huge to be
Yeah.
able to speak with her.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was like you had done the Owen Hart piece last year for the anniversary, which blew me away. I loved it,
Thank you.
and it was just cool because it was like a bona fide like radio documentary. It was just like it was great, and I was kind of apprehensive about that being a story that we would do at first, because I was like, how do we do this, and like what's the story like in terms of like. I don't know. I guess I hadn't really known many of the details that you put in that piece, and when I heard it, I like saw it. Like I saw that like, wow, this could be like we could do this, But of course, I would only do it if we could get Owen's family on board, and so it was a process of like reaching out, and it was amazing because Martha responded to me pretty quickly, and she basically sent me like 10 questions. This is the only time this ever happened. She sent me 10 questions that were so incredibly well thought out, like really, really thoughtful questions about like, your show, what you want to do, what do you have in mind, and all that stuff. And I was like, and she's like, I'm going to be traveling for 2 weeks. Take your time with it. And I was like, and I'm in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to write like a school essay. This is going to be like an essay project. And so I did. I spent like 2 weeks like responding to this email, like in detail, like getting it all out there, like what I wanted to do. And that of course led to her inviting me out to Calgary, and we actually met, no cameras, and we just met, and it was me, her, and Oj, her son, and we just like had pizza together, and it was amazing. Like we like talked for hours, and it was just like, this is gonna be great. I felt good about it, they felt good about it, and then we just kind of put the wheels in motion, and then we went back out to Calgary.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I've always felt like that Martha has just like not like she's just chosen to stay away from wrestling, and somehow it's been viewed as like in this negative way. And I think like
I know,
like
yeah.
you look into this and it's like, man, like look at what she lost here. It's like I don't think I'd have many positive thoughts about that industry either. And I think it's often just looked at little things like Owen Hart in a Hall of Fame. It's like it's a really small thing in the grand scheme of things in comparison to like real life tragedy and
It's
how it
very
affects
true.
a family much longer beyond how it affects a wrestling fan.
Very, 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 very true. And that was one of the main reasons why I wanted. I was like, what is, not like what's our angle, but like what is, like, you know, with Chris Benoit's story, it's like, okay, you know, it's about kind of the people that are still here that is affected. What's kind of the way we're going to look at this story again, if we're going to bring it back up again? And it really kind of was that, where it was like, you really, for me, and I don't mean this like in an agenda sort of way or whatever, but you just kind of see like how people in the wrestling world kind of treat her and her family. And I just didn't really feel like there's just like much understanding. And then I listened to your thing, and then I'm like reading her book, and I'm like, whoa.
Her book is fantastic.
If
you haven't read it.
Yeah, this is wild. It is. It's amazing. Broken Hearts. Yeah. I was like, this is wild. And so that was kind of the main thing, was like, let's do the big piece where, you know, she puts basically what happened, what's chronicled in the book. Let's have her tell her story. And yeah, it's wild.
It's like, you know, ultimately, like, there was the settlement with the WWF, but, you know, you read Broken Hearts, like, that's very much like, if you want to see what the case would have been, like, that's what Broken Hearts is. It's just, I remember reading that for the first time, and it's just such an emotional read to hear it in her words. Yeah. And I think sometimes there's that separation that until you see it in her words, and I'm sure like your interview will very much convey that. I look forward to watching it. Yeah.
It's one that we're very passionate about, and it's going to be great.
Are you typically the one sitting down doing the interviews? Is it you and Jason? How does the interview process work?
Yeah, it's typically me that does most of the interviews with everybody. Jason is usually by my side, pulling focus and also asking questions here and there. He asks, he does run-ins with amazing questions, but he and I basically kind of do everything together. This year it was a little tricky. We got bottlenecked in terms of our workflow, so he had to go off the road for a little bit to make sure everything's running smoothly back at the home base. But for the most part, doing most of the interviews, and it's been a lot now.
Over some of the episodes of the previous season, I mean, you weren't necessarily just presenting the story that was already out there. In some cases, you were actually adding on to the story and finding new nuggets of information that hadn't been found before. Were there any instances of that in the second season?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of stories where there's definitely some like whoa moments for sure for me, you know, who've researched a lot of these stories and felt like, you know, what else can you get out of this? And then like a couple curiosities. There's always going to be there'll be some new curious nuggets. I don't know what to call it. That you'll find.
We're getting an hour on Herb Abrams. I think that was the one. I think that was the one when people saw, like, you know, there's subjects that, you know, maybe people could have guessed, but like Herb Abrams, I think that seemed to be the one that did get a lot of reaction when the release came out this week. Yeah,
I mean, I just have to mention it. It was not like when I originally wanted to do this series and trying to mine people I knew who knew a lot about wrestling about what story should we do. I actually had reached out to Sean Oliver, because I told you I was a shoot interview guy. Like, I had all those, you know, and he's the kayfabe commentaries guy. And Sean had said to me from the very beginning, Herb Abrams. And I was like, all right. And I looked into it, but you couldn't really find much about him on the internet, at least at that time. So I was like, I don't know, whatever. I don't think so, you know, whatever. And then last year he does an interview with me and he puts me on the spot and he's like, why didn't you do Herb Abrams? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? And I was like, oh man, you're right. And everything he was saying was like, made sense, you know? And I was like, yes. And so I went back to the office the next day and I was like, we're doing it. Everyone start working on it. Like, you know, figure it out. And someone in our office, his name is Howard. He works on our show. He just it's like his mega passion project is this episode. And he just took the ball and like ran with it and got all these amazing people to talk about Herb. And it's going to be a wild one.
So the season, it returns Tuesday night, March 24th. It's 9 p.m. is the 2-hour Benoit episode. And then this season, you're also introducing a talk show that's going to follow it each week. I mean, if that's not support, I mean, that's clearly a stamp of approval that this is our key show.
Yeah, we didn't expect that. That was kind of a new thing that was you know, we're not necessarily producing it, but they said like, hey, we want to do this kind of like, you know, after show thing. And I was like, all right, go nuts, you know.
Who's on that? Do you know?
Well, they announced Chris Gethard is the host, which is really cool. I mean, you know, I think he'll have a great perspective on stuff. So yeah, they're putting it together now and getting it ready for the 24th. So it'll be interesting.
Well, is there any chance that we'll see any flying apparatuses over the stadium of WrestleMania this year? Because that we were waiting to get to the media section,
Really?
and saw the plane going over,
right.
and that to me was my first indication that number one, this series is coming, and number two, Viceland is really behind this thing.
Yeah, that was amazing. Like I told you, we had 2 weeks notice to put the show on the air, and so we were scrambling together to figure out like how can we make a splash. And somebody in the marketing department, I can't remember who, but somebody in the marketing department of Viceland pitched the idea, and it was just like, wow, that's bold, and yes, go. And it was like amazing.
How'd you get Jericho involved to be the narrator?
Oh, well, first it started with Chris. It started with Chavo, because Chavo Guerrero, he was like the first person I talked to about doing a Benoit episode. And then I expressed, because of Jericho's amazing podcasts on the subject, it was like, what do I have to do to get to Chris, basically? And Chavo hooked it up in a big way. And we went down to Tampa and we did the interview with Chris. And then it was basically just like, we essentially needed to get a Canadian to narrate this season.
Okay.
It was a financing issue with how the series was financed, and so it was like, what other Canadian would be, who would be the perfect Canadian for this, So it was
The most famous Canadian wrestler.
yeah. And then I remember standing in his kitchen and being like, so, Chris, would you want to narrate the show? And he's like, yeah, I'd be really into that. And I was like, thank God. And so then that really wasn't much more than that.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
The perfect Canadian. Chris
The perfect
Jericho.
Canadian. And we actually just recorded with him not too long ago. Our first session was with him. So it's really cool to see his voice in there now.
So this you're continuing to edit and work on the series as it's airing.
Yeah.
And so I guess you'll have repeated sessions with
Yes.
Chris.
Yes. Yep. We have a couple more with him. Yeah. And
So
that's
from now, it's just a race to the finish line for you.
it's a
guys.
race. Yeah. It's a race. Yeah.
Well, Evan, I want to thank you so much for being able not just to come on the show, but also to do it in studio.
Yeah.
It's super cool of you
course.
to come in, and we're wishing you all the best of success. The first season was obviously a huge undertaking and was met with tremendous reaction from
thank you.
our listeners and viewers, and
sweet.
we're looking forward to the second season as
Yeah.
well.
Can't wait for you guys to check it out.
We will. Tuesday, March 24th, 9 Eastern. It's Chris Benoit, 2 hours,
Yep.
which I'm sure. My final question will be this, is that when
Sure.
you come out of an episode, this is something that you can see across wrestling, is that when there is a subject that is a heavily controversial one, is that good for you guys when you have that kind of, whether it's an argument, whether it is something that is greatly debated? I mean, is that maybe not necessarily what you go in hoping to achieve, but coming out of it creates that much more discussion about an episode and a story?
I definitely think that this episode will create the Benoit episodes. I think will create a lot of conversation, which I think is good. I think that for the most part, it's been kind of this thing that we shouldn't talk about. And I do think because it's focused more on the people that this affected the most, or not the most, but like a lot of these people were really affected by this story. And I think for them to have the opportunity and the platform to talk about it, I think it gives us like a way to understand it rather than just like distance ourselves from it, So I mean, yeah, we didn't enter into it because it was necessarily controversial or because it would provoke that sort of reaction. It really was more just like, that these people kind of needed to talk about it and felt like they really wanted to finally share their side and their perspective after being told not to for so long.
I think it's a subject people want to see addressed, tasteful. And
Yeah.
that's something that wrestling hasn't always been great with. But
Right.
This idea
That's
that
true.
it's just something we don't talk about.
Yeah.
It's very much like just absorbing this WWE doctrine that it does not really apply to the real world. This is a story that a lot can be learned from, a lot
Yeah.
can be discussed, especially with the with the removal of time and
Right.
more perspective on it this many years later. as
Right,
well.
right. Yeah. And I think that was achieved in a lot, like hearing, Jericho talk about it and Sander talk about it, years now after the fact. I think that's the step in the right direction for where it should go,
Well, we'd love to chat with you maybe closer to the end of the season.
Let's do it.
Get some of your thoughts. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much for popping by again.
All right. Yeah.
So there
Thank you.
go, everyone.
All
Evan
right.
Husney, the executive producer of Dark Side of the Ring. Mr. Ting is going to take you up. And,
Okay. Cool.
This is our first time we've had a live shift here mid show.
All right. I got to get back to work, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
All right. Once again, everyone, we're going to be opening up the phone lines later on in the show. So if you do want to give us a call, myself and Wai will be chatting with you. 732-800-4423 is the number to call. You can also Skype in by simply searching for Post Wrestling. We're also going to go over NXT from last night that featured not one, but 2 steel cage matches. I believe Braden Davies' show title was 2 cages are better than 1. I would say maybe on Wednesday, 0 cages were better than 2 or even 1. As well, ratings should be coming in about 40 minutes time, so we will look over that to see what the post-revolution effect had on AEW Dynamite from Wednesday night. And we can also go into some of the news items. One item coming out of WWE today is that we're going to see Steve Austin returning on the March 16th episode of Raw. In the lead up to WrestleMania, and then that same night they're going to be debuting a new edition of the Broken Skull Sessions with the aforementioned Bret the Hitman Hart, who we were just chatting about. So that should be Bret Hart. He is always extremely candid and extremely honest, and I think that's what you can crave out of a guest. And I think Bret Hart and Austin, what I enjoy most about those interview shows is the rapport that Austin has with his guest, and therefore allows the guests to really let their guard down and immediately really kind of open up with Steve. I'm going to try something here to take a phone call. And caller, you are on the air. Who are we chatting with? All right, well, call us back. I feel that the fader may be down, and it's over there, so we're not going to get too crazy here. But yes, so that will be coming up on March the 16th with Steve Austin chatting with Bret Hart and Austin appearing on Raw. Seamless way. I tried to take a call, and I believe the volume was down, so I tried. I got way too ambitious while you were gone, and never again. So 60 seconds without Wai, I totally fall apart. But
call us back, everybody. We're
yes.
Hey, that was great. It was awesome to get that level of insight from
yeah,
Evan.
super informative, and it was really great of him to come on over here to the post office. I so much prefer the in-studio interview as opposed to the phone/Skype. It's just comes across.
It's true.
better.
It's true. It feels a little bit different, but we prefer Skype, of course, when it comes to talking to all of you. And
if anyone's here in town, you can. Well, I'm not going to invite everybody over, but nonetheless, do you want to take a call?
phone calls for the rest of the show. We'll talk about a bit of news as well.
I want to chat about NXT as well.
Phone lines are open. Please call in right now. We go to John. John, who's on the line. What's on your mind?
First of all, I'm so happy to be calling a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah.
A big fan of you guys since the Law days.
Oh, thanks.
Wow.
Thank you.
A long-time listener. Thank you.
One of your podcasts gets me through my 8-hour night cruise shifts, so thank you for that.
Wow, what do you do?
I work at Loblaws. I'm a night crew manager.
All right.
Oh, all right. Well, from the law to Loblaws. How far we've come. What's on your mind though?
Well, first of all, I love Dark Side Season 1, so I'm looking forward to Season 2. And one of my friends was actually in that show. He played, like, during the acting scenes of the Shawn Michaels Montreal Screwjob episode.
What's his name?
Chris Chambers.
Oh,
okay. Chris Chambers. Yeah, local wrestler.
Yeah, he's been my friend since 20 years. I actually work for him. He runs a wrestling promotion.
No, he doesn't run the Loblaws.
No. He runs Super Kick Wrestling, which is
with Ashley
indie wrestling here in Toronto.
Yep.
And I commentate for him, actually. So I have to give a shout out for Super Kick Wrestling. If you guys for all you Toronto fans, come check us out. It's a really good wrestling company.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Anything else, John?
Yeah. After WrestleMania, what do you see Brock Lesnar doing? Because I kind of think he ran through, like, everyone on the roster. I mean, I would like to see him do, like, Keith Lee and next, and maybe Matt Riddle.
Yeah, I mean, this is assuming. I guess whether or not he has the belt, he'll probably have some sort of program coming up. What do you see, John?
I think he should always go into Mania as champions because I think it makes his matches bigger when the title's on the line, and it's a good way to get guys over if they beat him at Mania for the titles. So, because I'm really over the fact of him going into Mania without a title match. So I kind of want to see him every year going to Mania with the title and then losing it to a guy and putting that guy over.
Right.
So like I wouldn't mind next year him and Keith Lee, a main event like that would be kind of epic.
Yeah, who knows at this point, a year out. You know, do you think Drew beats him this?
I think that
I
this.
think so.
Go ahead, John.
After Monday night, I think they established Drew's like he did like 3 Claymore kicks to Brock Lesnar, and I love that. I mean, I think he's gonna go over at Mania.
All right.
Certainly. Thank you so much for the call, John.
Thank you very much.
We've also got this Friday on SmackDown. They have announced Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman appearing on Moment of Bliss.
That will be. I don't know what to think.
I'm excited to hear your solo review this weekend.
Oh my goodness. Those 3 on a Moment of Bliss.
Maybe they'll all have coffee together.
It'll be a very different Nash, Hall, and Waltman type of interview. I feel.
No Hogan.
No Hogan. No. Well,
It's part of the Hall of Fame induction.
You know.
I guess Hogan did his bit with Bray, and that was it.
Hey, we go back to the phone lines. Hansi on the air. What's up?
What's going on? Yo, Pollock, I was the first guy you picked up on. I didn't realize you couldn't hear me. So I thought you would go, oh, it's Hansi? Fuck that. Talk to you later. Or something like
You always think so little of our opinion of you, Hansi. I mean,
No,
we take your call every week.
No, I know, but I didn't realize because it's on delay on the thing, right? So I didn't even hear that you couldn't even hear. So I was like, what the hell did I do? So I was like freaking out for a minute, but it's all good though. It was just really funny though. I thought I'd bring it up, you know what I mean? I'm just joking around, but.
Well, what subject did you get halfway into before you realized you weren't on the line with us?
Well, no, the topic that I wanted, quick topic that I wanted to discuss. First, like. I want to say the Jake the Snake promo was really, really good. Like that was I can't wait till him and Arn Anderson battle out. And even Arn Anderson even had a rebuttal in like the coach's corner, which was really amazing. So that's already hyping me up. But that was a really good promo. I saw the sit down with Morrow and Gargano. And listen, I wrote this on Twitter, right? That even though Morrow did well in that sit down interview, I like the way he handled himself. Gargano's acting is coming across like community theater, like a rural guy that, like, just figuring out how city tough guys talk. Like, I'm not really buying into Gargano's heel persona, but the question I want to leave you guys with, whatever, is I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on if you guys saw the Ruthless Aggression era of Brock Lesnar, because I thought that was probably the best episode they did. And the reason why I say that is because, I mean, maybe it's just like going back into that time and seeing how like fearless they were with going, hey, you know what? We're gonna push Brock Lesnar. Like within the first couple of months of his career, he already has victories over Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and The Undertaker. And it's like, wow, like I never seen this guy. Like I forgot how much they pushed this guy without any fear of like backlash. And I wonder how come they just don't do that as much now. Like they'll be like push and stop, and it feels like we'll never see a Brock Lesnar type push again like that. And that's all I wanted to get your thoughts on. That's cool. Anyways.
Okay, you've left a lot of for us to discuss, so thanks as always, Hansi.
Thank you, Hansi.
Take it easy, man.
Number one, on the Johnny Gargano front, I totally agreed during the first half of that segment that Gargano's acting, to me, it was just so over the top that I just felt it was like silly. I really liked Morrow in that role. Mm-hmm. And I did feel by the end of it, I thought Gargano kind of found his groove when he was like confronting Morrow. And overall, I thought the segment worked, but I completely agreed with the first portion of that, of Gargano, just like the overacting, the like standing up from his chair. It was just a little too cliche for me, especially when we saw such a drastic difference the week prior on Dynamite.
Yes. I don't disagree either. I mean, I think I really enjoyed the attempt, and I think they got into like sort of like a realm that can be excellent for professional wrestling storytelling. But my problem with it was that it never really got to the point. You know, he kept trying to say, Morrow, you know what's up. You know why. And then at the end, it was more like, you don't know why. You don't understand. And
well, his point, the point he did bring up in it was that Morrow, this guy who I showed up for your documentary screening for when no one else did, I felt we had a relationship, and I didn't even get the benefit of the doubt from you when you labeled me Johnny Turncoat without ever talking to me about what my reasons were. You just instantly turned your back on me and called me a turncoat.
So you just lined that out, I think, a lot better than it came across in the interview, because I think in the interview it just felt like
it was too wordy. There was way too much dialogue for Gargano instead of just simplifying what the message should have been.
You could tell it was like very much, it seemed like an improvised type of thing, with like maybe at least loose bullet points. But I felt like maybe he was so caught up on like trying to emote rather than properly delivering, I think, the story, that by the end, to me, that kind of got a little bit lost, even though I think the emotion was certainly there.
And one of the only times we've seen Morrow put in an angle as well.
Yeah. Very effective, though, to have Morrow in that light. Brock Lesnar, Ruthless Aggression.
Okay, it's funny that we just did the interview we did. I did watch it, and I was more so just found it, like, obviously if you're doing a Ruthless Aggression series, an episode on Brock Lesnar would be, like, he was a major part of that period. For a 50-minute documentary, and they were not even allowed to interview Brock. Like, Brock would not be interviewed for it.
Yeah.
That was amazing to me. And granted, I'm sure Heyman was probably a better speaker for Lesnar, but you so much wanted to hear from Lesnar in this, and they clearly did not have Lesnar to work with. And it's something that sometimes I feel documentaries can be enhanced by what you can't work with, that you have to work as a contingency, that you get more creative ideas. WWE is never in that spot where they are lacking when it comes to talking heads, availability, footage. And this was one case where they had to work around no updated Brock interview to tell a Brock Lesnar story.
It's true. At the same time, I didn't really miss it because I know how Brock Lesnar can be in an interview, and I don't know how much more information you're going to get. Like, I don't think he would be a cooperative.
His firsthand experience, yeah, it would be in an ideal scenario where he would be, reflective on that time period. I think it would have enhanced it, but they did not have Brock to work with.
Yeah, but I enjoyed it. I mean, as with all these ruthless aggression things, like I just watch it as entertainment. I thought it told like a really interesting narrative of a guy who was insanely talented and, like Hansi said, got a push that was incredibly unusual for somebody that new. And I would say played the character so well that he, I think, absolutely deserved it. But got sick of the road life, got sick of, the life of being a champion and wanted something different. And I think it really is interesting to think about how, as Heyman said at the beginning of the thing, that whole period was only 2 years. He was only in the WWE for 2 years, and he left that big of a mark to the point now where, I mean, look at what he's become.
Yeah, they didn't dive into the lawsuit that they had or the New Japan stuff. It was quite the bow on top at the end of it.
Stuff.
It was pretty much like he left WWE, tried out, almost made the Vikings, and then did some other stuff in MMA, and then he came home. And they pretty much summed up an 8-year period in about 4 minutes.
Well, it is an hour-long documentary.
I guess so.
All right, back to the phone lines. Hello, caller. What's going on?
Hey, how are you, man?
Oh, jeez.
Quick.
Hey, it's a shame about the whole Brock Lesnar thing, because I don't know if you saw the video of him at the University of Minnesota, and he was like a baby face, and all those kids were frolicking all over him. He can be such an endearing figure, especially in the right circumstances. Did you see that or no?
I didn't catch that clip. No.
Oh, it's tremendous. It was like if Hogan was at the tape parade for WCW. It was crazy. I never thought I'd see Brock Lesnar in a babyface format like that. But it was pretty cool. Real quick, John, what are your thoughts on the? I'm getting the shepherd's hook here. I can feel it gnawing in my back. UFC 248 with Weili Zhang. I mean, that chick is impressive, man. I never heard anyone kick pads like that. Like she hits like a dude, man. I think Joanna's in trouble. What do you think about that?
I think this is a very important fight for Zhang. I think that, Jacek is a significant test for her that I think is ultimately going to showcase, like, is Zhang going to be this impressive, long-reigning champion? I think if she beats Jacek, she is going to explode in terms of popularity after this fight. But it's a very tough fight. I'm having a really hard time, imagining how this fight goes. Like the fight with Jessica Andrade, it was so short. We know that she has that power. But I also question, like, Jacek cutting down to this weight again. Is there going to be any problems in over the next 24 hours in terms of the weight cut as well. Like, this is a very, very tough fight for Zhang to be having her first title defense against. But
and then you got
yeah, go ahead.
And then you got Marco Madsen too. That guy's impressive too. A former
yeah,
Olympic
this is
wrestler.
a Olympic silver medalist. He's fighting on the prelims as well. I don't think this is the deepest card in UFC history, but I mean, Sean O'Malley is back after it's been 2 years since this guy fought last as well. There's some interesting stories on the undercard here, but I think most of the attention is on those two title fights. That I'm looking forward to both the championship fights.
Yeah, it should be a good show. I can't wait. That's all I got. I'm out of here.
Brandon,
Oh,
post
man.
wrestling Hall of
A
Famer.
very obedient Brandon from New Jersey.
I think I spooked him with the quick. I was only kidding around.
Thank you for the call, and we're going to continue to take phone lines all the way until we get our AEW NXT numbers.
Do you want to chat a bit about NXT beyond the Gargano segment? We had 2 steel cage matches. The first one, Tegan Nox and Dakota Kai. I watched the. Maybe it is also the fact that we are coming off that Cody Wardlow match, but I thought like these 2 cage matches. It was that first match. I was going to say this the other night, even before I watched this match, that one of my biggest pet peeves now is the dramatic facial reaction after the near fall. I'm so shocked that they kicked out. And dude, not Dakota Kai, it was Tegan Nox did this thing. On top of that, she did my drops down Kai, and she's just standing on top, and she's got to stare down. What have I done? And it was just, to me, and then we had Raquel Gonzalez get involved in all of this. It's like, what in the WWE format, the cage match at one time, it was the blow off because you knew you were getting a clean finish and this was going to be a violent match. Well, we no longer are getting clean finishes in them, and you can't really produce that violent of a match. It's containing them. So I think that these 2 examples, like I wasn't blown away by the first cage match, and then the second one, I didn't understand that ending at all.
Velveteen Dream
Shoving out Roderick Strong, and somehow he's going to leapfrog to get the championship match. Like that, that would have been like Roman Reigns shoving King Corbin out, and then the next night challenging Goldberg for the title.
Completely negates, I think, wins and losses. The importance of winning that cage match in order to get to a title.
Like this Strong Dream feud sucks.
It is certainly, I think, a bit of a disappointment. I don't disagree that at one point, I think ideally a cage match is reserved for that type of, severity. But I haven't really come to expect that level from a WWE produced cage match in quite some time. To me, it's just a place that people can jump off of, or, do some sort of like wacky finish. And I think if you're strictly just watching for high spots of people falling off of the top of the cage, I think you would have been decently satisfied with Tegan Nox versus Dakota Kai. You saw a number of big bumps. I thought the end was creative. But if you're certainly looking at it from maybe a storyline perspective, why is the babyface continually trying to escape? What sort of punishment is that dealing? What? Yeah, like I could definitely.
To me, both matches, they were just examples of why people don't care about cage matches in WWE. It's not a gimmick that enhances a match. It's a detriment to me. I think it takes away.
I don't know.
You're not getting any finality to it. It's not significant. It's like what's the most creative way we can get out of this? And the Dream Strong finish, it's just what I hate so much about, okay, Velveteen Dream is the guy we're going with, but we can't let him beat someone. Imagine if they had that mentality that Jon Moxley is winning the title in 4 weeks. So that means we can just have at it with Jon Moxley. We can beat him like a drum because he's getting the title at the end of it. And we don't want to hurt anybody. So we're going to have him lose knowing that he's going to win at the end. Instead, they said, no, Jon Moxley's beating everybody leading into this pay-per-view. He is going to be red hot before he challenges. Velveteen Dream couldn't just win this match, vanquish this feud, and he sets his sights on Adam Cole. Like, let's give everything to Velveteen Dream if he is our challenger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seemed to me like they didn't even care so much about the finish of the match. Like,
nothing.
Who won or lost, as much as it was, I think, their clever way of trying to get to Velveteen Dream versus Adam Cole.
If you watched everything from the finish onward and nothing else, you would just have assumed Velveteen Dream had won that match. He's posing on the top of the cage with the NXT title.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just thought it was way too convoluted to try and just come up with some clever way to get out of these matches instead of delivering just a winner and a loser.
Any other?
On NXT, what else do we have? We had, you know what? They are really fast tracking Austin Theory. Instead of doing the long baby face that's kind of just this, like John Cena 2002, they flipped him heel already, and he seems very comfortable in that skin already with Isaiah Scott. And they had him beat Scott as well. So it seems like they're very much putting him in the fast lane.
Yeah, after essentially being sort of like the whipping boy for Tommaso Ciampa, turning him around like this,
and got his arm snapped right before winning.
Mm-hmm. That was a little abrupt, I thought.
Yeah, he came back. He won it with the one-armed ATL. Yes. Yeah. And then Chelsea Green qualifies for the ladder match at TakeOver. That was notable. I think the best thing on the show was, I enjoyed the sit down. I didn't love it. Because of the first portion of it with Gargano.
I really liked Undisputed Era versus Lorcan.
Orny Lorcan and Danny Burch. That was good, the tag.
Very good match.
And they're doing the Broserweights against O'Reilly and Fish next week in a rematch, as well as Keith Lee and Cameron Grimes. And Grimes got a ton of heat from the crowd at Full Sail.
He did.
So that should be a very good match between those two next week. So that's what they kind of set up. I'm not loving NXT right now.
It's a solid show, in my opinion.
I wouldn't say it's a solid show right now.
I mean, you can have a problem with, I think, some of the booking. I think it's still a pretty solid show.
What's the hottest feud right now in NXT?
Hottest feud right now in NXT.
What's the big feud that you want to see culminate?
I guess what's going on right now with
Ciampa Gargano is kind of their big thing.
Yeah. I'm excited for Walter versus Balor, if you count that as an NXT feud.
They're doing the NXT UK tapings this weekend, and Finn Balor's advertised for them and pretty much spelled it out on Wednesday that he's going to be showing up there. So I guess the question is, Balor and Walter, do you do some kind of mix? Do you do that match at TakeOver in Tampa? Do you wait for Dublin?
I think it would be a Dublin match, pretty clear.
Or do you do it at Tampa and then Balor comes back for a match in Dublin 3 weeks later?
You can have some sort of integration.
I would say Balor and Walter should be involved in some form or fashion on both shows. So, that's coming up this week. So we'll see what is happening next with Finn Balor.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Neil, you're on the air. What's going on?
Hey guys, how's it going? Can we just make a couple of really quick points first before I ask a question?
Okay.
First, really enjoyed the first series of Dark Side of the Ring, and I'm really looking forward to the new run, all the more so after hearing you talk about it with Evan. That was a great chat.
Thank you.
It took a while to reach the Vice UK channel, so I heard your weekly reviews of those episodes before I got to see them. So, I mean, I knew it was going to be very good from what you guys had said. Way, really enjoyed your rendition of the Spider Cage song on Rewind to Raw. Good work, Andrew from Cape Breton, on those lyrics. But you did them justice. But here, my main point is, John, I'm not really a huge MMA fan, but it's kind of the key to my main point this week. I don't always listen to the MMA shows, forgive me. But I did listen to the preview of UFC 248 with Cody. And it was a really great listen. I got hooked in at the beginning by the Tyson Fury chat, because that's something I do know a little bit about, and ended up listening to the whole show. So really excellent. And I'm going to ask a silly question, John, because you are the all-knowing one on these things. Did you know that the UFC events are not pay-per-view in the UK? BT Sport acquired the rights. And although it's a pay channel, there's no extra fee. There's no charge at all, even for the McGregor, even for the really big events. So UFC 248, like all the UFC events, will just be on at 3 a.m., the main card anyway, middle of the night this Saturday.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I had thought that they were going to switch that. Was that not something that was about to be switched and then didn't? Was that the case?
Possibly because I'm far from it. I'm far from an expert on that, but certainly over the past year or so, all of the UFC events, including the larger ones, have just been on the BT Sport regular channel.
Okay.
That's what got me thinking. You know, WWE might be looking to sell the rights to their pay-per-views to a provider that might do the same thing. If Netflix or Amazon Prime Video bought those events but didn't charge their subscribers something extra, I'd be a happy camper because I've got both of those services already. it seems a neater option as well than looking to different streaming services in every country. We don't have a ESPN over here, and I don't know what the situation is in Canada. To try and splinter those rights across all of those territories would seem to be a hard proposition, particularly in one financial quarter.
Well, if it's ESPN Plus, I mean, they're certainly going to be limited by territorial rights because, I mean, ESPN Plus isn't available in Canada. I think in that case, you would see that the regions that don't have ESPN Plus, it would just stay status quo with how you're getting your pay-per-views. And for many, that would mean the WWE Network. If it's something larger, and I really don't see Netflix being a place that would be going after WWE pay-per-views. Like, I don't know what they would necessarily gain from that, unless they significantly overbid everyone else. But if you're looking at a service that is, available in so many more geographical regions, then it would be something that it's going to cause a big disruption in terms of how they're distributing these because of pre-existing deals as well. So that's a big focus of this. And, the time is ticking down of this first quarter announcement that Vince McMahon had laid out as a potential release date, as we're, exactly a month out from WrestleMania. Because if I was one of these services and I was about to commit so much to acquiring the rights to these pay-per-views, I would be adamant about starting it with WrestleMania and not with whatever the next pay-per-view is. They just announced, is it like Backlash or whatever the next pay-per-view is?
Yeah, I guess it'll be Backlash, won't it? So it's interesting though. Yeah, and there is some precedent with Amazon Prime. They cover at least in this region. They have the U.S. Open tennis. They have rights to Premier League soccer. So they do live sport.
And they've dabbled into NFL as well. Like that seems to be one that, I mean, they seem more apt to be going into live sports than, say, Netflix, for instance.
Yeah. And just finally, I'm sorry, I really don't mean to take up time, but just on a personal note, I'm really looking forward to meeting the both of you in Tampa because, as I let you know, I'm planning, all things being equal, all things being well, on being over for WrestleMania weekend. And I have to say, you got a question on Askway this month about one thing leading to another, one podcast leading to another. And it genuinely was you guys announcing your live event that got me thinking, right, come on, let's pull the trigger on seeing whether you can make this trip. And of course, it's the post-wrestling, because I'll be going solo, it's the post-wrestling family that's going to help, because I'll be meeting up with Davey, MJ, Brandon from New Jersey.
Oh wow!
John Cena Evil. There's quite a few of the folks I've managed to get in touch with to meet up with. So I'm just praying everything works out because, as you might have heard, this weekend there's the 16 carat tournament in Germany has been already hit by various things. Alex Shelley isn't going because he has a job as a caregiver with people with compromised immune systems. Post wrestling's own Jamesy, for similar reasons because of his job, might have to self-isolate if he went to Germany and came back. So he tweeted out there tonight that he isn't going. And in fact, a regional airline collapsed last night in the UK because it was in financial trouble anyway. But people are not flying at the moment, so that seemed to precipitate just So I've got both fingers on both. I've got both fingers on both hands crossed that things will go ahead.
Yeah, it's something we're all following very closely. So we'll hope for the best, of course. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Okay, we have the ratings in from Wednesday night, and AEW last week did 865,000 viewers. They were up to 906 this week, while NXT did 717 last week. They were up pretty much virtually identical. This week they did 718,000 viewers. AEW was fifth for the night on cable with a 0.35 among 18 to 49, and NXT did the exact same number they did last week in that demo, a 0.23. So AEW back over 900,000, which they had not been since those string of shows back in February 5th was the last time they were over 900. So receiving a bit of a pay-per-view bump, not a huge one, up from 865 last week.
Coming off the pay-per-view, yeah. Cool. Sounds good. Back to the phone lines.
Let's continue.
Caller, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey, it's MJ. It's a little loud. You hear me all right?
Of course, MJ. We're used to it.
I wanted to call to revisit the Dark Order.
Okay.
And whether or not anyone's opinions have changed on the Dark Order now that Matt Hardy, the being the elite, the Free the Elite, the stuff they're doing together, whether or not that's made you change your opinions. It's real loud. I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks, MJ.
Thanks, MJ. Well, we haven't seen the whole storyline play through yet.
I think people's opinion has it's not the dominating portion of the show, which I think it really hit its low point that December 18th show where they closed the show with the Dark Order laying out the Elite, and it was greatly rejected. And I think they realized that this was a direction that people, I think the Dark Order, I think if you have a compelling story and building it around a mystery is an easy way to hook people and get their imagination going as to who the Exalted One will be. It's contingent on the reveal, done well. But then from there, it's, okay, what's the next step? Now we don't have the surprise to build people to. Now we have to see the actual substance of this group. And will people take to this group as a main event act? Do they belong in a main event position? Because, the argument of just going back to more meat and potatoes, like hot wrestling, compelling promos has worked. And that's been the story of AEW in 2020, where it seems a lot more positivity towards the shows than those couple that they had in, especially in December, where I think a lot of people were critiquing as they were getting away from the product they wanted out of Dynamite.
I think the group's always missed like this kind of headlining leader, somebody who could be seen in a main event scene, similar on the level of somebody like a Chris Jericho leading an Inner Circle. And whether or not it's Matt Hardy, I think it was just kind of begging for that sort of credibility that it didn't have prior to it with just the Super Smash Brothers. So, we haven't seen the end of it yet. So who knows? They could swerve us at the end and have Matt not be a part of the Dark Order and be part of something else. I don't know. But maybe it's a little bit too early to say. But it's certainly, over the past several months, been a lot more interesting than prior.
Yeah, I think that they've realized that. But now they're at a point where I think you have to put some more focus on the Dark Order. So we'll see where that goes. But back to the phone lines.
Hello, caller. You're up. What's up?
Hey, guys. Paul from New Jersey.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, so just so I heard it right, I'm of the understanding that for the Dark Side of the Ring, they are doing a Dino Bravo?
Yes. That's part of this season's episodes.
I'm actually really excited for that one because, I don't know about you guys, but obviously, like, wrestling does have the history of, like, any other entertainment business, a lot of death and a lot of early death. That was, like, the first time, I think it was in, 1993, where I was kind of just a fan, didn't really know any of that side of it. And then seeing that come up on the news and having, like, that be my first introduction, like, wow, like, of that story. So I think that's really one that gets lost in history. So I'm really excited for that one. But to my question, I know you guys were talking about the main event between Velveteen and Roddy Strong on NXT. I may have missed it with Tegan Knox and Dakota Kai, but just between the finishes, this company seems to really kill the cage cell gimmick for me. And I wanted to enjoy it last night, but I was just annoyed by not only the main event, but even knowing that Raquel Gonzalez is going to interfere. It was just so telegraphed. And lastly, when you see a swerve like with what Jericho did last night, I bit as much as anyone else did. So what is the disconnect, and are they just using these gimmicks for the sake of using gimmicks?
That's what Wednesday night felt like me with these cage matches. The point should be, like, we have the direct comparison of how AEW announced their cage match a month in advance and promoted it as such. Like, this is our first cage match, and it was going to provide a winner and a loser. And, it's not so much, I'm just picking on these two matches from Wednesday night, but just a larger issue you have is that when you have the big match, it almost seems like it is this exercise that we have to perform of how do we get ourselves out of it. This week, we would have seen Tetsuya Naito and Hiromu Takahashi in New Japan. And a WWE mindset would be, okay, we have two champions. We can't beat either of these guys. So how do we get out of this match? Versus the mentality that I think everyone watching that show would have believed we're getting a winner, we're getting a loser. It's not how do we get out of this match because we don't want to hurt either guy. And I think sometimes you lose so much when that's your primary focus of not hurting anyone versus we're picking a guy that's going to win, a guy that's going to lose, or vice versa, a woman, and putting all that heat on the winner so that your audience knows I can invest in this because I'm going to invest my time in this and I'm going to get an answer to this question that they're going to build up for hopefully several weeks.
I completely agree. I think, look, any of these companies these days have all amazing athletes, amazing wrestlers. I mean, people who wrestled in college, they have Olympians. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the story, and I just think AEW is really focused on that. And hey, nobody hits every time, but I just think WWE is really lost with their creative, and I think NXT is in a little bit of a slump. So yeah, but anyway, that's my call, guys. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Appreciate the call. Yeah, and the other thing we didn't mention, they did the Rhea Ripley piece where they took her to Raymond James Stadium, and we got some maybe not so subtle. Tampa Bay Vipers, I think, are the name, the XFL team. I mean, those were discreet, weren't they?
Is that where they play?
I guess so. They had. Do they play at Raymond? That's a huge stadium for the XFL team to play at. Yeah, but just doing kind of a feature on Rhea Ripley and how she came into NXT and immediately drew comparisons to Charlotte, and it's been she has tried actively to disassociate herself with that comparison. And I like the promo from Rhea.
Yeah, it felt real, felt grounded, and seems like this is building up to be a big moment for her debuting at WrestleMania. So, yeah.
They do play at Raymond James Stadium, the Tampa Bay Vipers. As you look towards that, who do you think calls that match at WrestleMania? Do you think it is the Raw announced team, or do you think that the NXT team gets...
Is Morrow going to be doing these co-branded shows?
The last one was... he wasn't there at the Rumble. Nor was there like an NXT specific match on the Rumble.
I don't know. That's really a question for, I think...
I would think after the Survivor Series, that's probably something they're going to avoid. But yeah, I mean, it's a question worth like that's being presented as like the NXT match on the show. It's also
Charlotte, you know, on the show. So I imagine maybe it would be Phillips.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
That is what it could be. That's a long show. It's a long show, even when you have two commentary teams to switch back and forth to as they go through their marathon of matches. A month outway, 1 month to go.
Oh my goodness,
till WrestleMania.
I know. It's just creeping up.
Any other news items you want to discuss?
Not really. Is there anything else in the news?
I mean, today has been relatively quiet. We got the Austin news for Raw in a couple of weeks. Lance Archer was not at the show on Wednesday night. Dave Meltzer reported it was some creative change that they had. Mm-hmm. So I guess you would definitely look at him as a potential candidate as Jake's guy, depending on when this came together with Jake Roberts. I did enjoy Arn Anderson's rebuttal that he had on his...
I haven't seen it yet.
He's been doing these weekly interview segments called Coach's Corner. So maybe he's replaced Don Cherry. And just... cut like a great 90-second promo on Jake Roberts. I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm a Clydesdale, and I look forward to seeing you eye to eye. I mean, just
excellent.
Man, this guy is just—he's great. He's great.
Why is that stuff online and not?
I know
TV?
It's kind of his reaction to whatever happens on the show. But I look at. Arn, it's like he hasn't really got to cut a promo on TV yet. No. Jake had the big promo last night. Tully, I think, is vastly underutilized. It's like if these guys are there, I want to hear from these guys. I'm not saying every week. I know time is limited, but he to me is those are just they're great talkers, and I think people they could significantly help people, different guys that they're attached with. We can also mention. Do we have a call?
No, we don't.
Coming up this in the next couple of days on Friday night, you're going to be solo. Rewind to SmackDown.
Yes, I am. I'll be talking about it sounds like Nash, Hall, and Waltman on Moment of Bliss, and I'm sure plenty of other fallout involving the Fiend and John Cena, Goldberg, and all that stuff. That'll be a solo show from me this Friday night on the Post Wrestling Cafe.
And Way's doing that show solo because I'm going to be back on Saturday night with Phil Chair Talk. We're going to be doing a UFC 248 post show that everyone can listen into after that card from Las Vegas. Sunday, new Thunderstruck with W.H. Park as we will be back Sunday night, Wai and I, with the Elimination Chamber post-show. It does not feel like we have a pay-per-view coming up because it's only now at 4:15 p.m. that I remembered we have Elimination Chamber on Sunday.
Sunday. Not only that, it's also the John Pollock birthday bash.
Okay, stop.
Sunday night. At the stroke of midnight, we ring in John Pollock's 36th year of existence.
Let's end the show off looking at the card for Sunday. There's 6 matches announced. I guess we could see some additions on SmackDown, or they announced before the show. On top, Natalya, Liv Morgan, Shayna Baszler, Asuka, pending her wrist being okay, Ruby Riott, and Sarah Logan in the Elimination Chamber match. I mean, there's no other winner I see happening other than Shayna Baszler here. I don't think you can make any kind of argument as to who's winning this. It's going to be on them to make this a compelling match when I think everyone knows what the deal is.
Yep. I would completely agree with that.
Braun Strowman versus Shinsuke Nakamura, Cesaro, and Sami Zayn 3-on-1 handicap match for the Intercontinental title.
Oh, geez.
I'm not a fan of these. Like, even with, Nakamura and Cesaro and Zayn together, I don't know. I'm never a fan of these for, like, your title. It's kind of just there on this card for me. I assume Strowman retains.
I don't know. I don't care.
Giant interest in this. The Miz and Morrison defend the SmackDown tag titles against the New Day, the Usos, Heavy Machinery, Lucha House Party, which will be Grand Metalik and Lince Dorado, and Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode. Probably coming out of this, I just see like a multi-man match for WrestleMania, and this being way too early for Miz and Morrison to lose the titles, and just a question of which teams are in the title hunt for WrestleMania. But this could be a very good match on its own. I don't know how much interest there is, but you have enough talent in there that you could have a really spectacular match. It's, especially like Lucha House Party getting to do something for once. But I mean, not a match that's going to carry your interest into this show. Street Profits against Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy, rematch for the Raw Tag Team titles. AJ Styles and Aleister Black in a no DQ match, and Andrade versus Humberto Carrillo for the United States title. This is a show that will happen on Sunday night.
Yep.
These matches will occur. These matches will end, and we will talk about them.
Yeah. It's really an extra edition of TV, really. So, I'm sure there might be some surprise. I think the biggest story would be if this ends up being one of the final WWE Network pay-per-views.
I guess there's always that possibility. I mean, if some deal is announced before WrestleMania, I guess there is that.
See, I feel like shows of this level will continue to stay on the network because these are, I mean,
you don't see big dollars being spent to.
I can't
acquire
see
Elimination
anybody.
Chamber.
I can't see an ESPN Plus trying to sell this thing on its own. It's ridiculous. But I think the network is always, I think, a place for these this is a C-level show, really.
Like, realistically, I don't know why this show is even existing. Like, once they knew the Saudi Arabia date was going to be where it is, like, you're not attracting any new signups for this show. It's almost like, let's just do the one Saudi Arabia show and then we do the build to WrestleMania. It's no one's signing up for this. You're talking about a live gate that you're doing on Sunday night. Like, that's pretty much the revenue you're generating from doing this show on Sunday night. It's just like all the major stars are not booked on, like most of the major stars, like when you look at that WrestleMania lineup. So anyway, that's coming up on Sunday. We'll go live immediately after the pay-per-view. That will be live for Double Double, Ice Cap, and Espresso members of the Post Wrestling Cafe. And that's going to wrap things up on this edition of the Cafe Hangout.
I actually started the music earlier, but here it is again.
Oh, I should really have these headphones on, shouldn't I?
No. This works out well. Like I can hear this song. I'll just have it on throughout the whole show.
Well, thanks again to Evan Husney for joining us. Dark Side of the Ring Season 2, it returns Tuesday night, March 24th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, with a 2-hour episode dedicated to Chris Benoit and the murder-suicide of 2007. Probably going to be a very heavily discussed episode, I think, revisiting that story and all of the grisly details attached to it. And I'm sure you and I will be chatting about these shows each week once they return for Season 2. So thanks again for all of you for calling in, Wai Ting for steering the ship, and me for just sitting here and trying to take phone calls unsuccessfully.
Oh, come on. I want to give some shout-outs to the chat room. Hello, Kendall. Hello, Phil Chair Talk, who's in there.
Whoa,
hello,
the Phil Chair Talk.
Hello, Chris Elliott. Hello, Bruhavan, MJ, Eric, all you guys. Brandon from New Jersey, Jordan Yates,
Miles, Andrew McDonald. What's going on? Thank you guys for
All the
joining us
greats
live.
in one chat room. So thank you to everybody for tuning in, and we'll chat with you this weekend. Lots of wrestling coming your way, plus a UFC pay-per-view. No time to have a life.